But
Mhm.
anyway, okay, welcome to Tara. I think I was calling you Alara at the end of the last one.
Where are you?
Anyway, Tara, this is based as 54, which is really based for the TIs, but we're not a TI. We are an empowered individual. Welcome to part two.
Yes.
So you've let's let's take it from there. I mean, how are we doing?
Um, I think that's a good place to start out because it's ultimately the a big portion of the crux of my message to other survivors specifically, especially ones who are, you know, at the beginning stages of healing and scared and feeling helpless because undoubtedly any targeted individual is going to go through those feelings, specifically because there really is no, where to turn to get expertise to help you heal. And when you go into the community, the way our systems are set up for assistance, they aren't prepared. They don't understand what they're looking at, and that can be even more damaging. So I've seen a lot of people who I'm sure are victims. They've been experimented on or targeted or tampered with, and they don't know it. And they think they're psych cases. They're strung out on psych drugs and things like that. And you have people who do know it, and they just feel so hopeless. They're into the addiction program and strung out on drugs and alcohol just to survive each day and cope with the pain and the trauma that they have no real outlet, support, or understanding for. So, as someone who's gone through this, I've experienced those things, and I've experienced a lot of really extreme testing and persecution. And still, yet, that higher power, God, and that will to survive and love and have a conscience and to be conscionable and compassionate has been what has driven me to keep fighting the programming, fighting for my soul. And I have a life where things aren't easy. I don't know that they'll ever be easy, but I can manage my condition. I can manage my life, and I have love in my heart, and I'm healing, and I'm gaining a broader understanding instead of becoming more divided. And I'm reintegrating my child parts and creativity and talents that were compartmentalized and learning to love myself and to use them for my own enjoyment, instead of for somebody else's ritual or somebody else's intention or agenda. And there's a lot of freedom and reward with that because what you find when you unpackage yourself is that you're this incredibly powerful being. And if you've been compartmentalized and you've been programmed to be used like a computer, like an asset, one of the biggest keys to healing is recognizing you can retrain yourself and reprogram yourself in time to utilize that ability to compartmentalize for your purposes, for your ability to function in life, to manage your condition and emotions, and to go through the healing process without completely losing it, basically. And because a lot of us were exposed to very secret or confidential type stuff, there may be things you don't want others to be aware of, even in your energy field. If you are trained in the psychic war, there's scanners and sniffers and all sorts of people that are trained to just get that information out of your energy field. So if you're trained to hide energy for other people, what you'll need to do is learn to use that training for yourself and help yourself with the skills that they've forced you to do. But in order to do that, you've got to be dedicated to your conscience. to the connection to the higher truth, which is love and compassion. And it starts at home with yourself, always. And especially at the beginning of the process, and the further along you get, there's always going to be people who will try to cut you off, try to take your faith, try to reorganize your mind and bring you back to the post conditioning. Being aware of that and being prepared for that and making the hard decisions that it takes to deprogram, like choosing to stay away from environments that might not be conducive to your healing, could be triggering, could be overwhelming, or people who might be targeting you could be there. Sometimes it can be lonely, but you have to choose yourself and your energy first, protecting your spirit bodies and your consciousness, because you're literally bringing back pieces of your consciousness and your soul that were trapped or contracted out and held captive and being used. And so I just want to, I guess, bring that message forward, that there is a way to get help, but it starts within. It's an inner thing. It's between you and your God, and it requires spiritual truth of love and compassion. And if you can do that, and if you can learn to become neutral and observe yourself and your situation without expectations, recognizing it may take you a very long time to have a clear understanding about, what you really want to do with your life versus just all these programmed things that you are being, set up to do, and take time to work through those things. It's worth it, because then you'll get to control yourself.
That absolutely is amazing. I don't like to say amazing. It's a bit sort of hey man. What I'm asking is, when you talk about soul and energies and all these sorts of things being in certain places and parts of energies and things and your energy field, and then scanners or sniffers or whatever it is who can sort of suss things out. What does all that actually mean to the average person?
I think to the average person, it won't mean much, because the average person most likely isn't aware of these levels of reality. Their brains are entrained to the frequencies around them, which are intentionally meant to interfere with their perception of the more subtle frequencies pertaining to the multidimensional realities and higher, more subtle heavenly planes and things like that. So the average person probably just thinks it's all poppycock, and maybe I'm a really good car salesman,
Are you a good car salesman?
No, I'm actually a terrible salesperson because I hate lying. I don't like pushing things on people for money. I'm not materialistic. I thought it was funny. I looked at the comments on the first one, and someone's like, oh, in America on the dole, obviously they do well. They can afford beauty products and wigs. And I'm like, wow, I haven't had any makeup that wasn't hand-me-down literally in a decade. I'm not even wearing makeup aside from mascara and a little bit of kids' sparkly eyeshadow smeared on my lips and my eyes. And this is not a wig, So I'm actually, my water is going to probably be turned off next week, unless somebody loans me or gifts me money. And my internet also every month gets turned off and has to be turned back on, because I'm on a fixed income and because I have a child, and because I'm not given a plethora of money. And in America, it's not the dole. It's an insurance policy that I paid into for a long time, because I did work for a long time before I was so disabled and so disoriented from what was happening to me, that I absolutely could not anymore. And I hope one day I cannot claim that label, because I am healing, and my desire is to get to a place where I can reclaim my creativity and my natural abilities and use them to be productive in this society again. That's my desire. The problem with our system is they do not have anything in place for rehabilitation and help. I do not get therapy. My son gets one 30-minute session a month. That's it. That's not therapy. They drug you and suppress you, and that's all they give you the money to do. And they do not give you an opportunity or way out, even if you are rehabilitatable with the right treatments. It is a scam. It's a closed system, our healthcare system. And the Medicaid and Medicare system it's become a parasitic relationship. And that's something else, because it makes me mad too that taxpayers are out there supporting people with money like me who want to work but can't because of secret projects like this. Overall, it does drive up the bills on society. I recognize that, and I want to I want to say, hey, I recognize that. That's not right. I had talents, I had abilities, I had the capacity to focus and to be consistent at one time. And that was taken from me. And what I went through is absolutely not compensatable with any amount of money. And what I still go through 20 hours a day or however long I'm awake, basically I'm reaping $2 an hour for experiencing and working and dealing with and stressing over. And these are important things that I deal with. They really are. The people who are in these programs are dealing with important things, the ones who are aware and waking up. And we need to focus on reclaiming ourselves and healing ourselves and coming together and talking about what we can do to orchestrate in peaceable ways, in ways that are not illegal, in ways that are not, violent or destructive or anything that falls right into the trap of the elite that want to start a class war and want us to fall right into their hands, but actually start facing just the facts of what's around us, what we're living in, the consequences of it, and empower ourselves enough to ask ourselves some honest questions like, do we want this? Do we want to live this way? Do we want to support this with our tax dollars and with our lives? Do we want what this is creating in the future for our children? And then be willing to have a voice and get over the fear and the doe eye and the traffic light response that we're so entrained to have. We can't fall into the trap of feeling powerless, even if it seems like we are. I felt powerless. I literally am up against the world as far as my perception can tell. I have no advocates. I don't have lawyers behind me. I don't have money to pay anybody to get behind me. There are experts who know me, doctors who have treated me, who care for me deeply and are proud of me, but everyone seems to feel powerless. And what I'm trying to say is that is part of the psychological warfare. We got to get out of the trance, got to snap out of it and recognize we are the body. We are the spirit of love and Christ on earth. And I don't care what your religious path is or spiritual path, if you abide by what your teachers say they believe, then we would all have no problems coexisting. And we really shouldn't. It's a war industry, and it's a psychological game that feeds a parasitic financial structure that is absolutely devastating and destructive to ourselves, that is behind this stuff. And that's what we need to be willing to take a look at. Look at the number. Look at the facts. I'm not asking people to believe in the paranormal things I see in the fourth dimension. To people who are experiencing that or who were initiated without their consent, in other words, sodomized as children in ritual abuse, they had their third eye forced open or forced out of their bodies via technology. These people need help and they need understanding of what they're dealing with. And so I can assist to whatever degree I'm able to, I will. But the real message, the real reason they hated me so much and tried to take me down and discredit me so badly is because of the common sense, rational shit, I'd really like to say.
What exactly are we talking about when you're talking about all those sorts of things? What are these programs? What's actually happening?
Well, like here.
Or is it a benefit to go into that? What are we really dealing with here?
What we're dealing with is a soft kill. It's a kill program. We're dealing with people who have decided in high levels that if we don't take control of our lives and exercise our free choice to take back our power, then we deserve to be killed off through these different methods through over a few generations. that if we're not smart enough to cop onto their deceit, then we're not survival of the fittest. We're not smart enough. We don't get to evolve. They do, because they outwitted us. That's the mentality of the people who have their hands on the money and on the weapons and the drugs and, stuff like that. And this is not a pro-human agenda at all. What is it?
So,
I think,
I mean, are we basically saying that because they're telling us about MK Ultra, because they're telling us about all these programs, in other words, what we're doing right now, because we're being made alert to all this, and the fact that we don't respond means, hey, you've just given us permission.
That's it. That's why they got the guillotines. That's why they got the ovens ready to go. I'm sorry, we have an opportunity to stave off this prophecy. That's what the sign of Jonas refers to in the Bible. I talk about the Armageddon timelines. I talk about the Janus end times programs. This is basically a timeline agenda connected to Zionism, connected to the kill program, the desire to hold a population and put the power, redistribute the power. And so from a spiritual perspective, that's how I look at things and deal with things. And so I've had to look really deeply into the scriptures and stuff to deprogram myself, because there's times where I can't think outside like the literal, the Bible, like as if it was actual instructions, like a command. And that's not the right interpretation. It's the spirit of the message, not the letter itself. And I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought because I wanted to explain too much and then forgot what my point was.
No, don't worry. But I noticed you use you've quoted scripture, you've used the Bible. I mean, does Christianity, does that help, or is it actually part of a problem because there's so much SRA in the background?
There's both going on. There's a problem with false religion. There's a problem with the false message of Christianity and basically what the church has perpetuated, this kind of fear, hateful judgment.
Well, there's a big difference between church and religion.
Exactly.
Or spirituality. I mean, are we talking? There's a lot of people are debating this now.
I'm talking spirituality because the spirit that I came to know by reading the New Testament and by accepting Jesus in my heart as a child met the description of the fruits of the Holy Spirit in the New Testament. It's real simple. It's written very basic for a child to understand it. It's translated around the world. That's why I refer to it, because it covers just basic spiritual truths and what the qualities of God's spiritual energies are. And but they're the same across the board. If you're in the right spirit and have the right intention, it's spiritual fruit. If the fruit is good, the tree is good. If the fruit is bad, the tree is getting chopped down. So what spiritual fruit is qualities of energy, it's virtues. Virtues are what are eternal. You have people in cults obsessed with numbers and math and geometry and platonic solids. But what is that in reality? In reality, a platonic solid is an eternal virtue or an eternal quality that is unchangeable.
I don't quite get that. You're
Plato,
talking about platonic solid.
Yeah, maybe read Plato or Socrates.
Yeah.
This is more Greek Platonic philosophy that I'm referring to right then. But it actually, it's really expressing the same thing, which is the living spirit that brings life, quickens life, and loves and heals and is willing to sacrifice itself for life on earth and goodness. The evidence of it is its goodness, is the fact that it's loving, peaceful, compassionate, non-judgmental, understanding, and truthful, and things like that. These are the ways we know what is talking to me, what is communicating to me, what is motivating me and impulsing me. Is this coming from my soul and from spirit, or is this coming from some messed up, dysfunctional, or even evil desire in my own heart? Or is it coming from an outside force? Because there's that too. But you asked me just about the regular, normal person, the average person, they're not going to be real tuned into that, the spiritual stuff. But if you put the two together, it's really important, because our biology and our spirit bodies, and pretty much all occult information that you go and research, it comes and boils back down to the electric and magnetic fluids and the electric and magnetic functions. And it pertains to our energy field and our consciousness. And what we're dealing with now is basically an intrusion upon our biological surroundings, our environment, with frequencies and synthetic electromagnetic fields. Those
Are you talking about 5G, the enslavement technology? Are you talking about these microwaves and all that sort of stuff?
That's a huge concern. I really want people to be aware of that, because there's been a push for it here to get on board real quick, and that would
there's
be
a hell of a push. A lot of people are trying to get around it.
But even above and beyond that, we have things like smart meters and Wi-Fi everywhere, and just towers, and all of that stuff adds up. Personally, I just found out I'm sitting next to a Superfund site, basically on it. Harris Corp is now up to 38.6 on the radiation scale. That's super alert. It hasn't been cleaned up since the 90s.
Explain that. What level are we talking about here?
We're talking about the highest alert there is. They need to clean it up. Nobody's talking about it, because the scale is it's a 100-point scale, and right now it says it's 38.
Is that an American scale for nuclear war or whatever? Could you explain that?
I didn't look into the details of everything. I was just looking at the site, at the numbers, and all I know is that Harris is listed as a Superfund site again, which means the radiation is out of control. It's too high for people to be around. We need to be cleaning it up. We're not talking about that. We're talking about bringing in more Chinese, investors and private space flight manufacturers, and more technology and chemicals to interfere with our ecosystem and dump more stuff into our lagoon and our intercoastal waterway, when our dolphins have herpes on their skin from whatever is being dumped in there already. And we can't even do the basic,
what are people able to see? I mean, is this something that people can see? Is it in the water, or can you feel it, or what?
We know what they did was, nobody wants to swim in the water anymore. I mean, I grew up around here. We all swam in the water. We didn't think twice. I don't get in the water anymore. I don't even get in the water in the ocean. The dolphins, it breaks my heart every time I see them, because they literally, every time I see them, I think, why aren't we doing something so simple like giving a tax credit to residents who stop using fertilizer in their yards, that the runoff causes a lot of problems, and start using the ones that are symbiotic with nature, that work just as well, or switch their grass to grass that is local instead of grass that is imported in and causes these problems. We haven't even begun an educational process to help slow down the problem at a fundamental level. We're just going to keep piling on top of it, while the citizens are getting radiated beyond what they're being told. There's several actually around here, hot spots.
Now, explain. I'm not sure. Explain that. I've seen websites where you can see venting from nuclear power stations. That they'll vent in the middle of the night. It goes off the scale. It doesn't matter what units you use, and then that is blowing into major cities. Is that happening in the United States, or what? How do you know about that? Have you got a meter to say that?
These are not nuclear facilities that I'm referring to, although we have 5 in Florida. I'm referring to just a facility, just government facilities, military industrial complex facilities that have had toxic metals and chemicals, because of whatever faulty equipment leaks or whatever the problems. These materials have leaked out into the surrounding environment, to the groundwater and the soil, and it's putting off emanations of radiation and neurotoxicity and endocrine disruptors and reproductive disruptors things like that. Our rate of cancer in this county is about 15% higher than the rest of the state consistently over the past 12 years. Might be 20%. I'll have to recheck it. It's high and it's consistent. Nobody's talking about it.
Well, let's talk about it now, because I mean, there's a researcher did a lot of work at a base near Suffolk in Suffolk in England called RAF Woodbridge, and he got such radiation burns on his lower legs that he's now seriously damaged. Are you talking about that kind of stuff? People walking and getting radiation?
There are people who are energy sensitive, who are sensitive to radiation, who are getting skin burns from Wi-Fi. Okay, I know a woman who's like that. I feel the heat and I get agitated just from regular stuff like the phone and the Wi-Fi. I have to turn that off at night because it disrupts my sleep. It just depends on how sensitive people are. Some people are sensitive to it. Some people aren't. But
well,
I mean,
you can turn your stuff off, but what about your neighbor and the rest of the people in the apartment or
they probably wouldn't put it together. They'll just think they're having memory problems or they're having anxiety or they're just not sleeping well. They just won't really understand, or they've got depression. They'll personalize it and just think it's their health. They don't understand it's an environmental, agitator that's exacerbating all these things. And we have them going on everywhere. Pretty much everyone should feel bothered in the environment we're living in. It's not natural. If I go out of this environment into the country, or into the mountains, I can connect to the higher planes a lot easier. I have to fight to get there here, punch holes and things and stuff.
Now, when you mean punch holes, are you talking about punching holes in some kind of energy field or literally something?
Yeah, they try to block, they use frequency blockers and they try to densify the layers in the astral.
Okay, right. If we got people who are watching who have got problems or they feel that they've got some kind of attack happening, how do they recognize that, and what would you advise them to do?
Well, my situation's highly unique, so I couldn't really just project, this is what I did, but
just general markers, because I'm sure everybody's feels their situation is to.
Personally, the only consistent results I've had where I'm consistently getting better with less problems, less confusion, less agitation, less targeting is literally Jesus Christ, and recognizing that blood contract and working with the angels that come with that, and that Holy Spirit specifically.
What do you mean by working with the angels? I mean,
there are certain angels, the angels that are assigned simply to the people who are taking that contract, and they're not there for others. They're just specifically assigned for the people who are accepting the contract and going through the change.
Now, what exactly do you mean by this contract, and how do people know that they're actually,
okay,
so where does that actually come in?
Okay, so this world, I've heard people call it a matrix. It's a lot like a matrix that we're living in. Yeah, it's basically a black magic matrix with symbols and of language and frequencies and numbers used to entrap us in a false reality. So it is absolutely an enslaved, false, totally controlled reality. And the methods being used to maintain that control are occult methods based on blood magic and the principles of blood magic. So when Jesus came to the Jewish people, he told them their God was the devil. He said that in Isaiah, okay? He came to help break that curse. He conquered that black magic by not doing anything against the law according to the magic and then dying innocently, broke it, and was trying to bring the message of the benevolent one Father who actually loves all people to everyone, including that's who the Gentiles were, because the Jews were very ethnocentric. They just thought it was all about them. I'm not saying they don't have a very particular role in the plan of communicating to the whole earth. They do, but I don't think it's a particularly happy one necessarily. So We're all supposed to love each other and accept each other and let each other be for the most part, and just stop pushing ourselves on one another and allow one another to live, to seek peace, to seek happiness, to seek well-being and health. And the way our systems are set up right now in the States, we have corporations and lobbyists controlling our healthcare. Our doctors and their employers are all day long. They are stressed out and overworked. They can't make medical decisions. They have to have their medical decisions questioned by the insurance company and do forms re-explaining themselves all day long to people who didn't go to medical school. Stuff. Our systems have become so burdensome. It's not centered around the people at all. It is
And
literally
do the
like,
insurance companies then say yes or no on the basis of cost?
yes, and that's right, exactly. And it's often not what's best for the person. And then all sorts of therapies and potential treatments that are successful for many people are immediately ruled out because they're not covered under your health. They won't cover alternative or holistic care or even chiropractic under a lot of these um, plans. And so a lot of people are having to spend 800, 900 quid a month. And then on top of it, have to pay out of pocket to go see a chiropractor $50 a week. It's insane. We need to be able to spend our money the way we see fit when it comes to our health care. And that right there should be just a glaring red flag that we are entering this some communistic Marxist type of a operation.
Well, this seems what the whole thing is heading for. United States becoming one of the biggest communist societies based on Agenda 30. Have you heard of anything like that, the UN Agenda 30?
Yes, I believe specifically that some of my programming and some of the programmers connected to the psych hospitals are connected directly to the Agenda 21 that is now called Agenda 30, and specifically Jensen Pharmaceuticals has a hand in it. And
now, you mentioned a trade name. I mean, can you mention any details on that? Obviously, we don't want to upset anybody.
Well, it's real basic. Okay, there's a drug called risperidol. It was not approved for use on children until 2009, and only for schizophrenic children. When I was taken into the psych hospitals the year after going to NASA and being this gifted super Mensa student, suddenly, I'm losing my mind, cutting myself with razors, and my parents don't know what to do. They throw me in there, right? I mean, they don't throw me in there, but the doctors tell them they need to put, me in there. They put me in there, but inside those hospitals, they had no idea what's really going on. And that drug risperidol was given to me in I think it was 93. And I mean, friends of mine will remember my breasts leaking milk at 15 years old, 14 years old from that drug. And I was not diagnosed with schizophrenia, and it wasn't legal to give to anyone at all. And they've been giving me that since 1993. And there's no recourse for me. There's no recourse for my tongue popping in and out like a snake from tardive kinesis or whatever the heck the side effect is from that stuff, It's, yeah. And I looked up the guy who owns Jensen Farms, who created this drug, and he also created fentanyl. Well, how convenient. Fentanyl happens to be what's killing everyone else on our streets here locally.
What kind of drug is that? Is that a replacement to heroin or what? I mean, I'm not acquainted with the sort of drugs that people are using.
It's an opiate. It's an extremely dangerous and extremely potent opiate. And if you get just a little bit too much, you can die. Some people die just from touching it. We've had police officers die just from touching it. And these cartels are taking that powder because it's cheap and it doesn't take much, and they're pressing it into fake pills, selling them on the streets as painkillers. Meanwhile, the doctors do a hardcore kick everyone off painkillers, make it a living nightmare to give, true pain care patients painkillers. So you got old people, vets, disabled, suddenly turning to the street because they can't function, and they're getting killed with fentanyl.
Okay, well, you've we can have a look. We can have a look at your photographs. You've sent a couple of photographs. Do you want to talk about that yet?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about this area. So this is, we're Space Coast County. Like we're slated to be, the new like industry of the space and the militarized, space center here. And I believe it is absolutely has always meant to be a soft kill program here. This was a picture that I took with a flip phone um, when I was doing a lot of healing it was during 2012, the beginning or the end of, yeah, the beginning of 2012 or the middle. And specifically at the time, I was really angry and enraged and in the pain, deep pain from the abuse. And I wanted to capture my enragement toward the experimentation at NASA in my facial expression. I did also used to act, and I've done movies and some shows, and I used to do theater. We can talk about that too sometime. But
Yeah, I mean that's all part of your
yeah,
character.
it's relevant. It was part of my programming too, because that way they could use me in Hollywood if they wanted to. Um, but anyway, I expected to have a dramatic, angry face with very expressive eyes, but that's what came out of my eyes. The picture's kind of blurry, but in the good shot, and I'll try to find the original one.
So what are we
That
actually
light,
looking for here?
the light comes directly out of my eyes. It's just like a span of flame that comes out like that. It's like a psychic fire, and you can see faces in it. You can see what looks almost like an alien face in one. It's not an alien; it's a hybrid human, and I know who it is.
Are we
And
talking
then
about the right hand side of the picture or the left side? From
it's,
from the
where the
from the angle of
earring,
view.
see how where the earring's hanging?
Yeah.
It would be hanging right where the third eye of the alien face would be. So those two black spots are like the eyes, and you see the slit kind of mouth down there.
Yeah. So that. Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Now there's another one where you can see the lips real clear in the original picture, but it's really hard in that one. You're right. That one's really pixelated. I'm gonna go back through my old files and see if I can find on my other computer like the original.
I mean, in what circumstances were these pictures
I was
taken?
just I
Was
was
it
just out.
flash or just what?
No, just a flip phone camera, no flash, outside in the natural light.
So that's actually that's quite some time ago. But you've got some other pictures here. So some of the bases. Do you want to talk
Yeah,
about that?
yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll look to that. And there we are. And that's Malabar Air Force Base and Navy Annex.
Right. This is the location where I said they had a programming site set up in the early 90s when I was transported there several times from a hospital without,
The whereabouts is this? You got two pictures
it,
of this from the internet.
it is in Palm Bay, Florida, which is just about 25 miles, 30 miles south of NASA, where the space shuttle goes off at Cape Canaveral. We're like on the coast, just east of Orlando, basically.
It looks as if they've widened the runway there in that a lot. There's a lot of space around the runways.
Yeah, it's weird. They keep it in this pentagram shape. That's what I wanted to point out is how, and I had some better pictures where you could see the little buildings they had out there. They had these little white buildings, and they also had tents they popped up. But we were actually in the middle of a ritual pentagram the entire time. And I mean,
So were
obviously,
you at this base? I mean, what's the actual function here?
technically it's supposed to be, out of commission, I think, but it's not. I don't know what it's used for now, but back then they did use it as a covert programming site. I
And
don't know what's
when was that? I mean, what
ritual.
sort
I
of?
would imagine we probably still use it as a ritual site because of the portals we would have opened. So
I mean, I understand that a lot of the military bases are actually placed on energy lines, energy centers, which allows them to then access these things under military conditions. So yeah, is that what you're talking about?
that's very interesting because if you follow the access road to that annex all the way east straight, you land at the hospital facility I was at, which is on the river.
And what sort
And
of distance is that?
not only that, that access road goes right behind the house of four houses of family, and like we put these pieces together later on, but it's like, wow, we've been living right near these roads the whole time. And something was going on back
Okay,
then.
could you actually put those pieces together for what we're doing now? Could you explain the whole story
Which part?
about the base, what you were doing there, what sort
They
of
were
time is it? Are we dealing with the 90s or what?
the early 90s that okay, well, actually, okay, the early 90s, I remember going out there, but there was also in the early 2000s a time I remember being brought out there and programmed because I was married to my first husband at the time. And I remember,
What's the story there? Was he a handler or anything like that? What was the deal there?
no, I
Do you
don't
want to
want to
talk
talk.
about that? Okay.
I don't want to talk about his personal stuff. I
Okay.
don't want to endanger
Yeah,
anybody or,
okay. Fine.
you know. Um, so, but I will say this area, there is a bloodline breeding program. And I do believe that there are many, like multiple families involved in it in this area that didn't understand that's.
What do you mean by a bloodline breeding program? With what? Where? For what?
I have to be real careful with this stuff.
Yeah, well,
There's some,
you be as careful as you need to be.
I can't get into the details of which bloodlines and things like that, but because of the secret space program and because of their intentions with their experimentation multidimensionally and their interest and obsession with genetics, it's basically a hotbed for it. So if
Now,
you're,
you're skirting around a lot of subjects here. This is stuff that Barry King talked about way back in '93 and stuff.
I don't
Um,
know.
well, he was the first person, along with Lisa Williams, who discussed this about a base in England. Could you
Okay.
explain more about what you're talking about? It seems very similar. There's a base in
About,
England called Newbury, Greenham Common, and people brought in there experimentation on peace protesters and things using microwaves.
wow. I mean, I believe it. Like I said, I've really avoided watching testimonies and stuff because of my healing and not wanting to have to get triggered by anybody or influenced. I wanted to get, make sure I
Okay,
got my own story right.
okay,
So I am very naive about. I know the handful of people from the first Super Soldier Summit that I connected with at that time and kept in contact with. Um,
that's the one in
so
2012.
yeah, 2013. Yeah. Um, but so yeah, they're really interested in how genetics relate to the mechanics of creation and to um, psychic and spiritual like authority and power over different portions of the land and gaining intelligence and gaining or actually stealing like soul garments from families that they have beef with by breeding into their bloodline through like other members of their bloodline and making them little spies in the spiritual because we're talking about very advanced witches and warlocks and sorcerers and
In what
you know
way are we talking about
a
advanced?
lot of I mean a lot these bloodline you when you're born with certain abilities and it just is what you are
What are those
and
abilities?
I'm not going to sit here and brag about my abilities. Everybody has
Well,
different abilities.
you could brag about somebody. Let's call that person um,
I'll put it this way.
just
Okay, okay. I think I can
a
explain it
Joe.
this way without
Call it or
without.
Joey or Joanna.
I think I can explain it this way without hurting anyone or upsetting anybody. Um, spying is really about spiritual intelligences. They use them under their control in energy. Like energy readers and energy stealing information out of the energy, out of the etheric and out of the astral, just right out of your field, you know? So if you can read energy and you can steal energy, you can get information from somebody's head or from their ancestry that they haven't even accessed because their genetics aren't activated, So there's like a program set up where they'll breed into the families they want to conquer in some covert area, and then try to abuse and use those people for their agenda by having them access their spiritual realities and stuff like that, and download the information and then share it back to their spiritual intelligence system. And these are networks of intelligences. And so they can communicate. So what the Illuminati tried to make me do was like be that communicative. I'm a Gemini, so I was called, I think they call it an interventalist, technically, is what my deprogrammer said. He said it's called interventalist. You're basically the shaman who is able to move these spirits around in their spiritual computers and their intelligence systems and stuff, like move them around. So they had me doing it for them, and I've become conscious and reclaim my relationship with Christ and God and my spiritual authority through his blood. And now I'm able to, try to set things right and sort of watch over and kind of guard that and pray for what's going on and work with it from a totally different perspective than being a cog in the system, just promoting it.
That's a big deal.
Oh, it's huge, really, because reality begins in the unseen, in the spiritual. And if you can access things there, you can affect reality. And they know that. That's why they do this to people, and that's why they try to make them a slave to do these things for them.
Are you talking about manifestors, taking control of manifestors so that they can manifest things for the benefit of the other side?
Right. And they like to use us as karmic scapegoats. Anybody
is this the thing where they offload their karma?
Yes.
So they actually never experience karma. It always can be offloaded or
should. They don't reap what they sow the way that they should, because they've figured out these occult methods of basically putting the evidence of the seeds and the wasted material into the energy field of some unknowing, unwitting person who has a very angelic or very bright energy field. And they're like, oh, well, there's plenty of light there. We'll just dump it on them. They'll never notice. And, and that's how they kind of keep themselves in this reality too, to keep themselves in power in this reality. Because if what they reaped actually were put back upon them, they would very, very quickly not be in power. And that's why those curses and those blessings that Jesus spoke of in the New Testament, I believe, are such a powerful tool battling the Illuminati. And he said that that was one of the promises, that he would set it right. People would reap what they sow. If you did good, you would get good. If you did bad, you would get bad. And he promised at some point that was going to happen, and things were going to get evened out.
Have you read any further examples of that?
I think we see it happening already. I think with the Catholic Church falling apart, exposing the corruption and all of that, causing people to question the dogma, to question the systems, to question just being led like sheep, seeing the plagues around the earth that are breaking out, the weather changes, the financial system is, every day that goes by, you don't know. I mean, there's a huge bubble, and there's a huge effect that's eventually won't be able to be staved off, most likely. There's all sorts of signs and symptoms in society that we are deteriorating, that moral decay has set in and become cool and in fashion. And this is just the same old story back to ancient Canaan and the Baal worship and Molech worship. We're getting back into the same energy constructs.
You're talking about Baal, the god Baal or Baal?
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's
what are these gods? What are these things?
These are ancient gods from like Babylonian and Canaanite times, pagan gods. I'm not talking about the form of paganism people tend to think about today, more of like a Gardnerian psychology. That's not. These people where they invest their power in idols and in things and really thought that was the source of power and worshiping it, and even worse than that, they sacrificed their children. They gave their children over for sacrifice because the god was demanding it, and their civilization was always marked by the same thing, and it was the the separation of sex out of marriage so that marriage wasn't sacred anymore because sex was available everywhere. The over sexualization of the population breaks apart the family, breaks apart the soul. And also gender confusion to the point of hysteria. There's no more understanding of the gender principle, which is a basic operation of the fundamental mechanics of creation, male, female, negative, positive, electric, magnetic, north, south. That doesn't exist. So we're going into la la land where everything is, there's no more absolutes. Everything is perspective, which is very dangerous because now there's no more absolute morality. Everyone's on their own to do whatever pleases them. And materialism is God. So what you own, what you have, the labels on your clothes, whatever, you get brand name stuff, we're in that society now, basically. And if we're not careful, it's going to consume the goodness in this society. So it's time for the goodness to recognize that that's their role. And that's why these things are happening.
And how do people action that? How would you help? How would you see that people could do that to do what you're saying there?
I just think that the most important thing is that we start one person at a time with ourselves and be willing to start educating ourselves and to get fearless and start communicating with other people fearlessly and peacefully and our children and start taking personal action in whatever ways are possible. Maybe not buying plastic, buying glassware or glass bottles and refilling up your water jugs, making a compost heap in your backyard, growing a community garden.
You're talking good old-fashioned organic farming.
Good old-fashioned, just start living the way you know is right and defending your right to live that way from individual to neighbor to local powers, and focus. That's one thing about the United Nations agenda I actually like, is that they encourage local, they encourage us to get organized locally. So what I'm saying is, instead of waiting for them to push it on us and tell us how to organize and we have to do it their way, why not just start taking the responsibility for ourselves and do it a way that actually serves us and allows us to maintain those basic foundational principles that made America great to begin with, our constitutional rights.
Yes, forming centers for peaceful coexistence, as a friend of mine would say.
Yeah. And it's not about, and I think we need to boycott some corporations that are going totally computerized on us. They're costing us jobs and they're not serving us as customers. So a lot of these like cable companies and stuff like that, you're finding you can't get any real help. You only have a computer. The few people that are there are limited by the computer. They can't fix your problems because it's the computer. That sort of stuff is ridiculous. Boycott stuff like that. Don't go to those companies and let them know that's why you left. I'm not saying we need to get crazy and turn against all of our system, all of the things that we have, but maybe not be so dependent and reliant on other things and be a little bit more interdependent with one another and independent in a localized way, so that if something happens and the normal transit and the normal stuff doesn't occur, we're not so vulnerable. Why not have a combination where, a lot of people, chip in at the community farm and they get some of their produce and some of their, goods from the farm, but they get some of it from the store. And so that way, if the store ever went down, we're not totally screwed without any food. How about organizing emergency ground troops for protection in neighborhoods and areas during an emergency or afterwards? Get that ready to go by the people and for the people, instead of waiting for like FEMA or, God forbid, I don't know who the organization was in Texas that was disappearing homeless people and to these shelters. But there's been a lot of really scary reports about these types of tragedies being used kind of opportunistically for some very diabolical agendas.
Well, we've got another picture here which looks pretty amazing. Could you explain what that is? I mean, it looks like some kind of rectangular something. Oh, it's a ladder, perhaps? Is that a ladder?
It's a window behind in the background and a countertop going parallel. And that purple thing, I was standing there. It should be just me standing there. But my son took this picture with a flip phone, and that's what showed up. And I thought it was so cool because it actually looks like a fetus. And I've had my aura taken with Kirlian photography before, and it was these same colors. It was that purple with the white outside and the blue like on the inside here around my throat. But I remember the lady with the camera. It was in Ireland, and I remember her saying, "Don't let anybody ever tell you you're not an indigo. You are an indigo." And so
Who
yeah,
was it? Who was it?
that was me. That's just
I
my
mean,
that
in
was
that
my.
photograph, it looks as if there's sort of the violet thing
It looks like, yeah, it's just a violet
with a
energy
black
field.
behind it.
Yeah, the black behind it was the counter, and that in the center of it, see how it looks like a little fetus out of light or something? Uh, I don't know. It's like it was almost like somehow in some weird little in between second, an image of my spirit was caught. It looked so similar to my Kirlian photography. And at the time, I was in a really elevated state, and my angelic child was very, very close to me and integrating. So,
Explain that, angelic family members.
oh, angelic child.
Yeah.
Um, so my soul, like my my divine self in heaven, like the closest aspect to source, to God, to that Father, beyond comprehension concept we talk about, would be my divine child, the innocent little child. And that's what can enter the kingdom of heaven. That's what can open your heart. That's what has, so much magical power from the eyes of the controllers and the elite, and especially the hybrids and those that have lost their potential to embody spirit. They really want to use and abuse that divine child for its ability to manifest, like you were saying, for its ability for creativity or whatever, its genius at whatever. So there's a lot of targeting of the child, and one of the first things they do is separate your inner child out of you, so that you have soul loss and you're not happy, you don't feel love as much, and the magic of life is sort of gone. And a lot of people walk around like that all the time, and they don't know why. They just feel like they kind of have a hole. They need a shamanic retrieval on their soul. Basically, they need those parts brought back. There's witches and Satanists that walk around with people's inner children literally pinned to their own uteruses to try to bring themselves fertility energy and stuff. Like, it's gross. If you can actually see what's going on, it's gross. It's a slaughterhouse on our souls, on innocence. And that's why the church is so vulnerable, because they're very naive as far as the spiritual realm goes.
So where okay, we've done a sort of an hour part two. Where do you want to sort of take this? What's your mission? What sort of things do you feel you want to really get across here? What are things that you haven't talked to us yet?
One thing I would be interested in. Okay, here's a warning that I think is important. So one of the things that we're trained to do is astral project, right? But when I started being healed and corrected and shown how to use my abilities in a way that is not perverted or not dangerous, but under God's authority, I was shown basically, I stay in my body, but I can see, and things come to me that I need to see is how I experience it. And it's a lot safer in your body, and that's where you're meant to be. So if you've been through like these types of things, you really have to probably practice and learn how to get in your body. And there's layers of pain and body memory that are in your cells that they're going to be resistant to your consciousness penetrating them, because that means that it's going to open them up, and you're going to have to process that. And so that's why the disassociation is so easily kept, that resistance. So we have to be willing to go through the pain, learn to get ourselves back in our body, and then stay there, especially if we have spiritual gifts, understanding that God is one mind, able to bring whatever you need to see and know to you. And so trying to get out of your body can be a very dangerous thing. And it's just not something that I want
Absolutely. I would be very
expressing
careful on
my
all that.
encouraging in any way, shape, or form. I don't encourage that. It was something I was forced into doing, and that's why I know about this stuff.
Cause I've just had a thought there. I mean, that's the thing that Max was talking about, fighting with things and all sorts of stuff like that. Do you have any thoughts on Max and those recent film videos? I mean, we're talking here end of last week or so of February, but there's some very important videos have gone up about Max and Orlando Bloom and people like that. Is that something you're familiar with, or any of
No,
those other things?
I haven't watched any information on him. I've just experienced contact with him in the spiritual war a few times. And since he passed,
After his passing?
I knew him before he passed.
Yeah.
You know, he actually kind of gave me a warning before that happened, that I needed to get down and stay low. And I basically did. I left my presence online for quite a while, and I was gone a few months before he died for no reason, and I didn't come back for a couple of years, and that was why. I felt very strongly a signal, like a sense from him that I interpreted as a feeling like he was worried about Sarah, and he felt like he was in danger. Like, in other words, like he would go down to protect her and he might have to. And that was how I interpreted it. I'm not trying to say, what the truth is. I'm just saying this is how I interpreted the energy. And I appreciated the heads up. And then I helped him after the fact. So, because there was some systems that he was caught up in with some black magic type people, and he wasn't getting where he needed to go. And so, this is where there is a ministry that comes from heaven and from Christ, and through that truth that allows for the promise of justice to occur. And in that situation, it was not just. And so there was divine assistance. And he, as far as I can tell, has been quite the fighter ever since. And so I have nothing but love and compassion to send towards that person. I don't want to, bring any, harm to his name or reputation, or say anything negative. I think he was sincerely a person struggling to understand what he was, what happened to him, and trying to stay safe in a very, very difficult situation. And I think he was very brave overall.
Well, I'll second that. Finally, and on this part two, I mean, how do you feel that the two parts have gone? How do you feel it's taken you? What journey has this assisted you in your journey of healing, and also letting other people know?
Well, this is really good for me because it's really the first, interview that I've done in a while where I'm ready to kind of have long conversations about more in-depth stuff and unpackage some things and maybe try to, promote some ideas. And I'm in the baby stages of that, but this is really good for me because it's giving me an opportunity to now watch these and then reflect and think, well, what do I want to make sure I bring up next time, and spend some time in prayer and say, well, what am I meant to talk about next time? And I will. I have the ability, as long as I keep my mind clear and my heart humble, I have the ability to bring through information from the heavens, from the higher realms, and to communicate about things I see, and to just uplift people and encourage them. And I think that's ideally where I'd like to see myself. And I'd like to be using my creativity and just kind of working more with sharing information and talking. I like to talk and share information. So I'd like to get into doing this more. I just don't want to get sucked into any, systems of propaganda and I just want to be discerning. So I'm open
Well,
to
that's
invite.
good. It's good to be discerning.
Yeah, and I would like to meet other people who are either survivors who are just, trying to heal and want to exchange information, or, learn from my sharing, whatever you can take from it.
Well, we
That,
mentioned your website. I think you've got that going now.
yeah, and I'm going to be updating some things on that too. And yeah, that's up there. My Facebook page, I'm very active on. I share a lot of information on there. I try to get articles out and stuff that are on relevant topics. I think AI is an important conversation I'll want to focus on more in the future too. And yeah, I don't know. I just want to be of service at this point.
Well, that's good.
What I've
That's
been
good.
what I've been through is so intense, and I don't really even want to focus on me. I just want a chance to maintain my virtue and maintain my soul garment, and not have it messed with, and not be forced to be ripped apart again. And to I would love to be supported. I would love to have some friends,
Okay.
honestly, because the thing is, it's very isolating, and I would like to meet more people who are able to communicate about their healing and heal with other women who want to overcome and be heard and get past the trauma. And from a women's perspective too, you want to call it the hybridization thing, or you want to call it the wheats and the tares together, however you want to look at it. The thing is, we have a predatorial mind infiltrating humanity, and women have never been, I've never heard so many women in my life talking about narcissistic men. And I think it's this invasion, this mindset, and this technology is not helping it. It's hurting us. Like,
Well,
who
maybe
we
it's designed to do that. I'm beginning to get terrified that the march of the narcissistic man is like a B movie, horror movie, you know.
Yeah, it's scary. And I don't want a man like that. I don't want to have the way you have to deal with these reptiloids. You have to manipulate them and make them think that they're getting what they want, so they'll be nice to you. So your whole life is dedicated to manipulating them so they'll be nice to you.
I mean,
Otherwise,
is
it's a
that something you were trained in?
yes, basically.
Do you want to explain that? That's something.
It's grooming. It's just been going on all my life because I've had interactions with these species, you know. So they
Can
try
you
to
tell
groom.
us what kind of interaction you've had and what species?
Okay, so there's definitely hybridization going on, right? So
Like what
I've
type of hybridization? I mean, I've heard of soul swapping places where the people go in and the soul's taken out. The wetware has got the wetware, as they call it, has something else put in. So you got a reptilian or a grey walking around in a human body.
yeah. So there's also situations where you've got both a human and a gray or reptilian in the body, both.
Insofar as that the human awareness is there, and that's it.
Right. But the whole purpose of the reptilian is to overcome that human consciousness and kick them out and take over the body. And they usually do, unless you have a strong relationship with your God, and are connected to truth. Because you
Source,
don't,
as
you
they
know,
say, connected
to
with
God.
source.
Yeah. Yep. Um,
So, what other kind of things have you been exposed to? Then, I mean, those different aliens and things. You sort of
well, I
rolled
mean,
that off as if sort of very matter of fact.
yeah, I mean, I deal with different types of entities, in the spiritual regularly. So, I mean, I'm not bombarded by them now, which is nice, but I used to be when I was all over the place with my spirituality, when I was doing like the 12D shield and doing like certain like new
Yeah.
age stuff and inviting in different guides and stuff. It opened me up to all sorts of it ended up dividing my mind, causing me more confusion. I would hear things that weren't real, real information. It wasn't true spiritual or psychic content. It was confusion. It was false, delusion, basically. Just voices, um,
In what way was it delusional? Was it a
it was a
real
spirit.
delusion or
No,
a false delusion?
it was a spirit that I opened myself up to by channeling this some sort of new age guide, opening up to an alien UFO cult, basically opened me up to different spirits, and they weren't there for my highest good. So they tried to confuse and use me, you know.
What's your view on these sort of aliens, and how many have you met? I mean, what's their collective agenda?
To replace us. They took a fetus from me and one of my husbands, right out of my womb. I mean, they couldn't even
What do you mean,
explain
one
it.
of your husbands? Are you saying you've had many husbands, or something, a sperm from a husband?
I was married at the time. And I got pregnant, and they called it missing fetus syndrome.
The old missing fetus syndrome.
There was an ultrasound with a 9-week-old baby, a 9-week-old fetus, and then it was gone, and I didn't miscarry. And yeah, it's very painful for me to talk about that, but
okay, you don't have to.
But they've also taken eggs from me in 2010 that I was aware of, and yes, I thought it was aliens, and I did. I thought that was on a spaceship, but I don't know if that was just what I thought from a hypnotic suggestion, or what.
But this is very important. I think you mentioned that in part one. What were your experiences, and what did the aliens look like, and what did whoever look like, or what was involved?
I don't really remember much content about any of their faces. I just had this horrible feeling of violation and trauma. And I remember the door shutting and what the inside of the vehicle, the vessel looked like. And it seemed like it was a ship, okay, maybe like a gravitron dressed up like a UFO, like a gravitron ride at a carnival or something, like a door that it was a weird, opening door, like it was, I mean, I should go this way, like a UFO.
A graviton? What do you mean by graviton? Is it a carnival ride?
Yeah, it's a ride we have in the USA.
Have you heard of Misha Johnston? Have you talked to her?
Yes, I know Misha. Yes.
Because she was a sort of carnival showbiz family.
I did an interview with her in 2014, but it's not online now, which is good because I was talking about a lot of detail and very traumatic stuff. I think it's probably best that it's not there now.
Where do you? I mean, you've got yourself pretty well together. Really, you've really been able to articulate and talk and do it from an isolated perspective and stuff like that. And you look pretty well together. I mean, do you think you could go back to the so-called real world?
Yeah.
With a job and what about that?
I'm not consistent, and I can't focus, and I have different personalities that don't always remember what's going on. So here's the problem. When I get a job, sometimes just something can trigger me and I'll switch. And I'm talking with a different accent, or I don't know how to do my job. Or I've just freaked out and had an MK breakdown. Like I've literally been fired from every single job I've had. And I tried to work up until 2011 when my husband at the time said, when I got fired for the last time, and he said, Sarah, promise me you will not work anymore. It's too much. You can't do it. You need to focus on your healing and your son. And that's it. It's enough for you. This is making you worse, not better. And I was actually being triggered at work and accessed and stuff like that. So it was dangerous for me too.
Maybe I shouldn't ask you, but what were the triggers? What sort of job was it?
So, well, at the time, that particular job, I was doing sales, like telephone sales, just over the phone, hotel room phones, But see, I can't get into this too much because it could be.
I don't want to trigger you.
See, this is the problem is I can't just go out there and assume I'm not working for somebody. I end up, my life has never been what it appeared to be. Okay. That job wasn't what it appeared to be at all. This was an international businessman all over the world. And, there was communications that I made to him that were highly suspect. And
I mean, was he intelligence? Was he in, or a different intelligence or what?
From China. So not our intelligence.
Best not maybe pursuing that.
Huh?
Maybe it's not a good idea to pursue that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. My life is a lot of question marks for me, but what's not a good idea to pursue for the most part for me is going out into most environments where there's a lot of people and there's an opportunity for people to have access to me. Like they can call me on the phone and count backwards and put me into a trance. They can just send a little frequency to me and put me into a trance. I mean, this is the type of stuff that has happened to me. And I have literally embarrassed the living crap out of myself at every single job I've had because I've been triggered and set off at my job in order to humiliate me and discredit me. It's just a setup for me. When I first tried to get help, okay, and I went, I knew I couldn't go to the police already, so I did what I thought was
That's a big deal, knowing when not to go to the police.
Right. So I went to the hospital because whenever you go to the hospital, a nurse asks you, "Are you in danger at home?" As if they'll help you if you are. So I went there. I had a witness. I had videotape of my bruising, of the experience I told you about on part 1, where I was being abducted at night, manhandled and sexualized. I didn't know who was breaking in my house and how they were doing it. I just wanted an investigation and for my son and I to be safe. And so I went to the nurse and I explained to her I had the evidence and a witness, and she takes one look at my medical file, sees I'm labeled with having a mental health history, calls the police, and the organized crime person comes in from the police. He handles me. He lies to me and says, "Well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to get you," because I was asking for a real intelligence officer. I was like, I have real information. I need to scrub my identity. I need protection for myself and my child, and I will help whoever needs. I'll give the information I have, but I can't without protection. And he basically lied to me and said, "Well, we know this is very serious, so what we're going to do is we're going to make it look like you're going back to the psychological hospital because that's what we're supposed to do to you. And we'll have the intelligence agent meet you there, and we'll bring your son, and then you can be snuck out of there." And then instead they kept me there for a week for no reason and wouldn't let me out. And thank God my mother took my son and gave him over to his other grandmother for care, or they would have taken him into a system and God knows what they would have done to him. And this is the major crux of the problem. I can't protect my son from predators because nobody will take me seriously or look into it. That's a problem.
That's a big deal.
It's a real big deal. I challenge anybody watching this video, if it was your child and you knew your child was more than likely abused and traumatized and is disassociative at times because of it and running around with monarch programming, and you can't get any sort of justice or help at all, and you can't necessarily control whether or not he'll be taken or sodomized or electrocuted again. That's your life. Live with it, because nobody else wants to face that reality. It's just not pleasant enough for them. That's my life.
Well, maybe that's a good point to end at this time. You feel good about that? You've said enough you want to say right now?
I'm not trying to punish people for being in a state of cognitive dissonance. I'm not trying to guilt people. I want them to recognize how far the wool's been pulled over their eyes and how bad it's gotten and how out of touch they really are, and pull their head out of the sand, because the ostrich stance didn't help nobody. I'll leave it at that.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a great show. You're looking fantastic. Your head's together. It's I mean, you're doing very well, articulate and all that.
Long time to get here. And so, yeah, I'm really grateful. And I'm really grateful to God that my head has been coming together and that I've made it this far and that I have the desire and motivation to continue because I'm not done. I still have layers to deprogram.
Okay. Well, I hope as a result of this, maybe some good people will be in contact with you, and
That would be ideal, just to maybe start to network a little more with sincere people who care, some allies for victims. Maybe, where is there any real attorneys and investigators out there willing to actually tackle this stuff if you had evidence? That's the type of stuff I need to know. That's what I'm interested in finding. I need
and
real
just as a,
people.
a word of warning, of what happens if you get some nasty people trying to bring you in the program? How would you differentiate from somebody who's a good talking to you or bad?
Well, that's the challenge. That's the challenge. And so it would be nice if there was, some people who are allies who could say, hey, this person has proven themselves. They have a reputation. They've already helped some people. But is there anybody like that out there who has, any evidence they've actually done anything besides just front that they're helping?
Well, I can't answer that really.
Because this is what I'm saying. This program is expanding because of the fact that nobody's stopping it. It's like a virus that'll just keep spreading. And then it becomes everyone's children. And now all y'all's children are going to end up sex slaves and traumatized and associated slaves being handled and managed by maybe even technology or a computer if you're lucky enough to even have grandchildren at this point, if we don't wake up and change our future.
Okay, well, let's wake up and change our future. Thank you, Tara. Thank you very much indeed. You're an absolute joy. Thank you.
Thank you, Miles.
Okay. All the best for now. Best.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.